Sometimes love isn't enough. As an adoptive mom, people would often say this to me, as if to imply I couldn't love my son enough to change behaviors or heal his trauma, so I should probably just give up. At least that's how I took those four powerful words, which had buried themselves deeply in my mind, leading me to doubt my ability to parent my child. Sometimes love isn't enough. That is the truth. Oftentimes, you need love and powerful, personalized tools to raise a child who's experienced trauma and disrupted attachment, or a child who you're struggling to connect with. I am on a mission to help parents raising kids with a tricky past to show up with unconditional love and practical tools to lovingly manage even the most challenging of times. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Plus, if you like what you hear, I'd love for you to leave a review. Now let's get to the good stuff. Welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I am your host, Angie Grandt, and for this episode, I want to talk again about power struggles. It's come up quite a bit in parents that I've been interacting, and so I thought, let's just revisit this complex issue because I know that sometimes hearing something for the second or third or fourth or 10th time, it starts to really sink in and change the way that we look at our current situations. So we know that as humans, developmental science tells us that it is normal, it is expected, it is healthy for children to go through two stages of testing or learning about their sense of power in the world. And why is that? Well, when a baby is a tiny baby and they're just exploring that first year of life, and then that second year of life, there's part of their development is that they don't yet really understand their separateness from mom and dad. They're sharing mom and dad's aura. They don't have this awareness, this cognitive awareness that they get to make decisions that are separate from their caregivers. So they go through life doing things without any thought about separateness. But sometime around the age of 2, and it's not, an exact science, it's not on their second birthday, but sometime around then, it might be, for some kids, it might be a little bit sooner, for some kids, a little bit later. But nonetheless, sometime around the age of 2, children go through this developmental cognitive growth shift where all of a sudden they start to realize that they have the ability to make choices. They have the ability to make choices or decisions that are separate from their caregivers. Suddenly, children have this increased awareness that they are not one with mom and dad. And, they can't explain it. But what they do know is that suddenly they have this drive, this push to feel empowered. It is part of how we all are designed. And we see this come into full force with many of our toddlers. We see toddlers with power struggles, right? They want to do something, and if we tell them no, or not now, or maybe later, they end up in a full-blown tantrum oftentimes. And why is that? Well, at that stage of development, when children are starting to make decisions, starting to realize that they can make decisions, and then the adult not realizing this cognitive shift that their toddler went through, tells them no, or stops them from doing something that they just made one of their first decisions in life, and they're told no, they can't do it. It feels devastating. It feels disempowering. And then we see a tantrum. And I know, I remember hearing before I was even a mom, I remember hearing warnings of the terrible twos and the even worse threes. I mean, I've heard some other silly names for it, but it's as if they're described as making this choice to be bad. But I don't want to look at it that way. And actually, developmental science tells me that it isn't that way at all. They're trying to figure out how to be empowered. And I mean, if they had the full cognitive awareness and a matching vocabulary to go with it, they would say things like, I don't feel especially empowered right now, and I'd like your help with that. But our toddlers aren't saying that. No. Instead, they're asserting their power by yelling no, screaming, I do it, or whatever else that might look like with your toddler or toddlers in your life, right? They're just trying to figure out how to feel powerful in the world. If the important adults in a toddler's life have an awareness of this developmental step, this necessary step in a toddler's development, if we handle it by empowering our kids, they'll move naturally out of this phase sometime around the age of 4 or 5. And we can see it fizzle out before that, but around the age of 5 at the very latest, kids have moved on to the next developmental phase of what they're working on. But if, as parents or the close caregivers in this toddler's life, if we're not helping to empower our kids, then they can easily get stuck in this phase. And what does it look like when our kids get stuck in this phase? Well, then our kids are engaging in misbehavior to assert their power. They're doing things that can be scary or dangerous or hurtful or vengeful. When we don't help empower our kids at a developmental stage when they need that kind of encouragement, it can really have lasting effects on what their sense of self-worth is. So, what do we do at this toddler stage to help empower our kids? Well, there's some simple things that we can do. Some things like giving toddlers choices about, do you want the blue pants or the green pants today? Or do you want to sleep with 2 stuffed animals or 3 stuffed animals? Or do you want to dump the bubbles into the bath tonight? Or do you want mom to dump the bubbles into the bath? Offering these binary choices can often help our kids learn how to choose, and it can really help empower them, right? How empowering is that for a toddler to have a choice over what they're wearing, or even to ask them to pick out what they want to wear? So that's one thing you can do. Another thing that for many toddlers who are really trying to figure out where their power is in the world, for many toddlers, it can be things like letting them do things that normally the adults do, like turning on or off the light switches, or pushing the button to start the washing machine, or helping with household tasks, right? Like, can you help me take the plates to the table? Or can you help me take the bathroom garbage down to the kitchen? It's garbage day. I could really use a big helper, right? Oftentimes, for many of our little ones, encouraging them to be a big helper can be especially empowering for them. I know I see this time and time again when parents are really figuring out how to empower their toddlers. They really minimize the tantrums and increase that smile of pride that, if you love toddlers, that smile of pride is just heart melting. So that's my task for you is, if you know and love a toddler, find a way to empower them. Find a way to help them feel like they have a big part in what's happening in their life. But I said that this power struggle, as it seems to the caregivers, it happens twice in a very expected and necessary time during development for kids. The first time is between the ages of 2 and 4 or 5. And then the second stage, not surprisingly, is during the early teenage years. It is normal and expected that adolescents, teenagers, go through another phase of personal empowerment. And why is it necessary? Well, when we think historically about being at that age, is when children's brains, as they move into teenagerhood, their brains are maturing and they're trying to figure out, again, at a much higher cognitive level, but they're trying to figure out their separateness, their individuality. They're trying to figure out what their place is in the world in a much, much, much bigger way. So when our kids are 13, 14, 15 years old, it is highly likely that you'll see your teenager engaging in power struggles. And this can look so many different ways, but if you know and love a teenager, you probably have plenty of examples. But it can be kids refusing to help with household chores. It can be refusing to do their homework or not wanting to engage in conversation or sit at the dinner table with the family or arguing about the family vacation and not wanting or stating that they don't want to enjoy their time on vacation. It can look so many different ways. I do want to just throw out there that, you know your kid best. And when they get to this teenage stage, if you're noticing things that are concerning to you, for example, kids isolating themselves for, hours and hours and hours on end, well, on the one hand, part of that is about that individuality and asserting themselves. But if you at all suspect that your child's struggling with mental health, make sure that you get that addressed. But I'm talking here about a normal, typical developmental stage. And it is during this stage that, again, as parents, it is up to us to know how to respond in a way that really helps our kids to feel empowered. Because if I'm being honest, what normally happens at this stage for most parents, when our kids start digging in their heels, trying to assert their dominance, most parents react to that with a puffing of the chest and reminding their kids that they're not in charge. But I'm going to encourage you to take a step back for just a second and consider the things that your child is arguing about. Consider the things that they're really digging their heels in about or that they're refusing to do. If these things are things that impact your child's life, perhaps they could have a say in them. Because again, this is a necessary developmental phase that our kids go through, and it's up to us to do our best to handle it in a way that empowers them. I feel so strongly that it is not our job to overpower our kids, to teach them who's boss, because quite frankly, especially in today's society, when our kids go out in the world and want to get their own job, yeah, some of them might have a boss, but many of our kids are going to go out and be their own boss and need to feel empowered that they are capable and that they have a strong sense of self-worth so that they can go out and tackle the world in whatever way they feel driven to. I don't want to have a part in making kids feel like they need to respond to authority when really I feel like it is my goal to help kids feel really empowered. And so as we're thinking about things that might impact our kids' lives, these teenage years, their hormones are changing, their sense of their feeling of being accepted and loved by their peers can be especially hard. And when we as parents make decisions about things that have a big impact on our kids, for example, moving to a new home, getting a new car, even like what's for dinner or going on family vacations, these big decision things can have a huge impact on our kids. we don't know what's going on in their life. We don't know what kinds of things that they're dealing with or struggling with. And so when we're making big decisions, I really, I really implore you to invite your kids to be part of the big decisions and the little ones too, right? Have your kids choose what's for dinner or even let them help make it. Have your kids choose, if you're going to, I don't know, paint the living room a new color, maybe get their advice. You never know. Sometimes our kids have way better ideas than we do. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you feel like you're in a power struggle with your toddler or your teenager or anywhere in between or outside of those ages, really consider or ask yourself the question, what can I do to empower them so that they feel like they have a say in what's happening in their life? What can I do to help build their sense of empowerment? Because we are all beautifully designed to feel powerful, to feel capable. And so what can you do today or tomorrow to really help empower a kiddo in your life that you care about? That's it. I hope that you found this episode powerful, and we will connect soon. Take care. I hope that you found this episode so incredibly powerful. Thank you for joining us for Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. If you resonated with what you heard here, please subscribe to this podcast and give us a review. You can also follow us on all the socials. Check the show notes for all the details about how to start tackling behaviors and creating a powerful, loving relationship with your child, a child who needs your love the most. And if your gut's telling you that it's time for a change now, book a free consult. I'd love to help you love unconditionally and show you that you have that power within you.